Welcome to 1000 PS here in Austria. Welcome to the introduction of Husqvarna's 401 Vitpilen. So we've had the opportunity to ride this bike here in Austria in the kind of lower Alps in kind of mixed conditions, but that's way better than the conditions that we had when we rode the bike in Ronda in southern Spain on the world launch, because they were horrendous. Now when I rode the bike in the wet, I knew it had the potential and I was really looking forward to riding it in the dry, and thankfully it's lived up to my high expectations. So it's obviously based on the KTM 390 Duke, that's an obvious given. But that's not a bad thing, because that's an excellent single-cylinder A2 bike. But what Husqvarna have done is kind of matured or grown up the KTM 390 Duke. So it's got the same power, it's got the same torque, and it's got that same kind of awful kind of lumpiness at low RPM. So when you're coming through small villages and towns, you have to come back to fourth or fifth gear. You can't leave it in top because it's a little too lumpy. But it's also got that fun factor at about 6,000 or 7,000 RPM, where it really accelerates and really drives for a single-cylinder A2 bike. I would guess in this market of A2 bikes, like the KTM 390, it's probably the quickest, most performing bike in this category. It's really got some top-end performance, although it might lack a little bit low down. But what makes it very different from the KTM 390 is obviously the appeal and looks, but also the stance and the handling and the rideability. You'd think sharing a similar chassis and similar components that it would be very similar to the KTM, but it's not. The seat's much wider, it's much softer, it's much plusher. The suspension has got more flow to it, it's not as rigid, it's not as sporty as the KTM. The riding position is roomier, it's comfier, and the dash is also different. Both are riddled with electronic rider aids like traction control and cornering ABS and multiple rider modes that are easily accessible and easy to use. There's even a Supermoto ABS mode on the KTM. But what really makes this different from the KTM is its kind of ease of use. For me, I think it's an easier bike to ride, it's a softer bike to ride, it's a comfier bike to ride, and a kind of more mature, sensible bike to ride. It's still got that kind of KTM 390 power, but in a more sophisticated, more mature, comfier chassis. The KTM is kind of 20 minutes, ride it around a car park, go crazy, where this, you could actually do a little bit of touring and go a few more miles. And for me, personally, I would prefer it over the KTM. But I just don't know if I could live with the looks. So for me, it's a big thumbs up for the 401. I really like its soft approach, I really like its manageability, and I actually prefer it over the KTM 390. But then again, I'm over 45 and some of the other testers are a little bit younger. So let's see what they think. They probably prefer the radical and comfy KTM rather than the sophisticated 401.
The Vitpilen 401 is, to put it simply, a slightly more user-friendly version of the 390 Duke. The seating position is a bit more relaxed. The distance between the seat and the handlebars is slightly longer, which makes it feel less aggressive. It also rides in a more composed manner, probably due to this adjusted seating position. You get a bit more inner stability. The 390 Duke was very nervous, whereas the 401 is a bit more precise, a bit calmer. The engine is very similar to that of the 390. With the same minor drawbacks. We have the same issue with the quick shifter and shifting functions. It feels rather crisp and rough, not really smooth. I also slightly miss the torque at low revs, which is something you would typically expect from a single cylinder engine, and at the top end a single cylinder does not really rev out much either. So you only have a relatively narrow power band of about 2000 revolutions per minute where you really feel the performance. Otherwise it runs quite tamely. the suspension is solid, although interestingly when under load it compresses quite deeply. In terms of spring rates it is set up rather soft, however when riding over sharp edges like manhole covers it still bottoms out, which suggests the damping has been kept a bit too firm. So while the spring rates are on the softer side, the damping feels quite harsh. This might be something that could be improved later, but otherwise it is typical for a scrambler. You could sum it up by saying that the scrambler style suspension and handling feel more relaxed and moderate due to the seating position. For those who find the 390 Duke a bit too sharp, a bit too sporty, the 401 will certainly be the better alternative.
For me, the most interesting aspect of the Husqvarna 401 is the comparison with the 390 Duke, because these motorcycles share a lot of the same components. There are two differences compared to the Duke, one positive and one negative. What I like better about the Vitpilen is the riding position, because it simply corresponds more to the classic naked bike posture. Yes, the Duke is fun, no question about it, but I still feel more comfortable on the Vitpilen because it's simply a position I'm used to. What's negative, meaning worse than on the Duke, and something I can't fully explain, is that I felt the vibrations much more on the Vitpilen, especially in the foot pegs. It was really noticeable, to the point where I thought to myself that in the long run this wouldn't be for me. And interestingly enough, I didn't have that feeling on the Duke. That was definitely an interesting impression we got from this test. Personally, I have some concerns regarding the reliability of motorcycles from the KTM group, simply because I have repeatedly had negative experiences with them. And for example, even in this test, it was the case. Unfortunately, we didn't capture it on camera, but the Vitpilen had an issue with the side stand sensor. It kept falsely detecting that the side stand was down, which means you can't ride off, because as soon as you put it into first gear, the engine cuts out. And that is not exactly confidence inspiring when it comes to reliability. When everything works perfectly in a large scale test, except for one bike, and that one bike is once again from the KTM group, it does make me slightly concerned. However, I have to say this is just my subjective impression. I can't back it up with data. Other than that, to sum it up, I would say that anyone looking for the ultimate fun machine, but one that visually goes in a completely different direction and also has a slightly more conventional riding position, should definitely go for the Vitpilen. But if you're looking for balance, comfort and reliability, you will probably be happier with a Japanese bike.
The Vitpilen 401 is, of course, often compared to the 390 Duke by US journalists, but I think that is a bit unfair. I believe it appeals to a different kind of rider. The 390 Duke is a cool, cheeky, aggressive-looking bike for genuinely young people, whereas the Vitpilen 401 is probably more for those who want to relive their youth, someone like me. And because you sit on it in a really relaxed, stylish way, but at the same time, you have a proper, full-fledged motorcycle underneath you. And that is what makes it fascinating compared to other 400 cubic centimeter bikes. You get an adjustable suspension, a full electronics package, and a proper display that does not just show tiny, barely readable symbols, but a fully graphical, high-quality screen. The finish and details are well thought out, giving you the feeling that this is a complete motorcycle with everything included.
And now, this is not exactly a bargain. I mean, in this engine displacement class, there are motorcycles like the Speed 400 from Triumph, which manages to come in at an even better price. But this is a motorcycle you get on, and you have a very easy to access, laid back bike. But nothing has been cut back or left out. You have an adjustable suspension in a 400 cubic centimeter bike. That is fascinating. You have a quick shifter, you have all of that, but combined with an astonishingly low weight with impressively low running costs. And when you zip through the city with it, it feels like almost nothing beneath you. But when you park it in your garage, you have a stylish, distinctive motorcycle. And I am sure, of course, there will be people who say they do not like the design, but this is not just another generic bike. And I find it absolutely stunning. Here, I would confidently say that 3/4 of people will like it. It is a refined, stylish motorcycle in a lower displacement class with only one real competitor that truly excites me. And that would be the Speed 400 from Triumph, which comes with a slightly more classic look.
Yes, so personally, I still ride this Vitpilen with the LC display, the older generation. I love the motorcycle and I'm still just as excited about it. Back then, I actually rode the 2019 version of the Vitpilen from my brother. And at the time, I really felt that the clip-on handlebars were just not for me. I felt too front heavy. I did not have that sense of security. And that is why I noticed it even more now with the 2024 version. It is an absolute upgrade that it now has a, let's say, less curved handlebar. And I somehow fell in love with it all over again. I think it is a super sporty motorcycle. Visually, of course, it leans more towards the scrambler style, but it is one of my favorites. I find it extremely accessible, and also the seating position. It just makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel secure. The gear shifting is buttery smooth and the TFT display is excellent, giving you everything you need. And the quick shifter, I always thought it was fantastic on my Vitpilen and it just works brilliantly. The only negative thing I noticed was that it had an error message saying that the side stand was down and I could not get it to start. Even though that was not actually the case, I had to keep adjusting it, which is hopefully something that can be fixed. But overall, it is once again a really well-rounded motorcycle. Now, with the new version, it is yet another reason why I would seriously consider buying it.
The 401 is the white arrow, as we all know, and that is mainly because the seating position is completely different from the 390 Duke. You sit further back and the riding feel is entirely different from the Duke. It does not want to be ridden in a freestyle manner. It is more of a cruiser, prefers fast flowing corners. That is definitely the kind of terrain where the Vitpilen feels more at home, or at least where it feels more natural to me compared to the Duke, which wants to be ridden more playfully. And in general, in terms of the engine, quick shifter and blipper, I have to say, this machine is really well equipped. The look, absolutely killer. I think it is seriously cool. I really like the design. And when it comes to riding dynamics, it is similar to the Duke, just a bit more stretched out, calmer, not as twitchy, not, how should I put it, overly agile like the Duke. Instead, it just wants to be ridden beautifully through long sweeping curves. So I really enjoyed it as well.
The wheels, which look absolutely fantastic, you can tell the designer really put some thought into them. They were definitely having a good day. They have a cool, stylish look. In general, the bike has a really nice cafe racer aesthetic, and I believe that is exactly what it was built for. That is also how it rides. Great seating position, upright, not too sharp of a knee angle, which I always find really important. That way your feet do not fall asleep so quickly when you are heading off for a cappuccino, nice and relaxed. Apart from that, the price of this bike is also quite interesting because despite having a blipper, it actually costs less than the 390 Duke, even though it is built in the same factory. And I have to say, I really like that. It is a solid deal.
Hope you've enjoyed the video here from Austria. It's been great to actually get some dry miles on the 401. If you've got any questions, don't forget to subscribe or ask below. Hopefully we'll get back to you within 24 hours, but it might take a bit longer just because we're having so much fun.